Hello and welcome to episode 20 of the Wi-Fi, the Wise Mind Fireside Chats. And today I have with me Gabby Tishlock and Alec Wells. And we're going to start talking today about overwhelm. And so the reason that we've decided to talk about overwhelm today is because we were having a bit of a chat before we started recording the podcast, and I was telling the guys that I had actually managed to negotiate a day off every week, which I know most people probably take as granted, but I work part-time, so I work 7 days a week in the mornings. But I managed to I had that conversation, which I've been putting off for a while, to be honest. And I managed to negotiate to have a day off every week. And then I said that that day is going to be really useful because I can do coaching stuff, and I can book appointments for that day and do all that kind of thing. And the guys kind of picked me up on it and said, so you've negotiated a day off so that you can do other work. So I put my hands up. And so that's what we decided we'd talk about. So guys, I think I'd like to get your feedback on how whether you've fallen into that trap before, and possibly any ways that you've handled that, so that I can take that on board as I move forward.
Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate you on the ease with which you were open to having that reflected back to you, and comment that probably most people don't have that. I've imagined that everybody watching or listening to this has that person in their life, or is that person in their life, who picks up everything. It doesn't matter what chore, task, emergency falls in our laps. There's that one person who says, "Oh, I'll do that. I can manage that." And they juggle so many plates for so many other people that they are on the brink of overwhelm. They become physically exhausted, emotionally drained. And it's not until something happens to them, generally, that they realize, or people around them realize, what a linchpin they were. So one of the first and most important parts, to my mind, is the self-awareness aspect. How drained am I? At what level am I? My capacity am I working at? And then having the people around you who are prepared to help you introspect on that, because I think overwhelm is one of those kind of insidious things that we really can't spot for ourselves.
Yeah, you raised a really good points there. I think for me, overwhelm always comes if I stop reflecting and I just say yes to a lot. Now I'm much better nowadays. I used to say yes to everything, but I have to watch it. I really have to watch it. If I don't step back each time somebody asks me to do something or I get an idea and I don't step back to reflect, hold on, do I have the time? What does it look like? Can I actually even physically fit it in and do it? That's where my overwhelm comes from. The other thing I used to struggle with overwhelm was that I had a problem to ask for help. I thought I had to do everything myself. I cannot ask another person to maybe give me a hand. And if it's even something simple, like asking maybe just at home, can you do the dishes tonight? I have to work on something. Or, it could be something really, really simple we don't even think about, just little even daily routines to get help with, to free a little bit of time for ourselves, or maybe asking the partner, could you cook on Friday night? I'm really tight for time because I'm coming home late from work, then I have to run here. Could you cook? Things like this. So asking for help is another great way to deal with overwhelm. And then the boundaries to say, no, that's two big ones for me.
The unexpected, unasked for assistance of a loved one or a close member of your family social circuit shouldn't really come as an enormous surprise, and yet it often does to people. And I'm not sure if there's an element in there of not being prepared to ask for help. Some people are unwilling to accept help. But, you know, a good friend of ours, Erica, if she was here, would be saying, just remember that no is a complete sentence. We don't have to elaborate. We don't have to explain. That's on the expectancies of the other person. Why? Why are you saying no? And hands up, I still find that really, really difficult. Making no a full sentence will take a lot more additional work, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, definitely, Gabby, when you said about kind of asking for help, that's something I can definitely relate to. And I think it's something we have to kind of learn to do sometimes, because if we've been brought up that, you shouldn't ask for help, you have to be independent, you have to do everything on your own, it doesn't even occur to you to actually ask for help. There's many times when, there've been loads of people that could have helped me. And after the event, they're like, why didn't you ask? Why didn't you, call on some support? And I'm like, wait, didn't even cross my mind. I didn't even think about that, because I am so used to doing everything myself, and so used to, taking on everything and dealing with it myself. It didn't even cross my mind that I could ask for help. And so I think it's a learning process for some people to actually, first of all, be aware that I can ask for help. And that is, again, it's awareness. It's that, yeah, I'm getting overwhelmed. I need to stop for a moment. And what are my options? Yeah, I don't have to do this, or who can actually support me? Where can I go for assistance? And so I think it's something we sometimes need to learn, and then we have to practice, so that that actually becomes a habit, rather than always, feeling that we're burdened and we have to do it all on our own. It's getting into that practice of, okay, I've got options here, which I think for me is something that I'm still I'm still struggling with. It's something I'm still learning to do. It doesn't always occur to me, and a lot of occasions somebody after the event will say, well, you knew I was going into town today. Why didn't you ask me to pick up your parcel or whatever? And I was like, oh, yeah, now you mention it. Yeah, that would have been a good idea. um,
And, you know, in much the same way that there's a learned aspect to helplessness, we also have this learned aspect to overwhelm, because unfortunately, we live in a world where some children are treated as skivvies in the home. We also live in a world where a lot of young people are carers from a very early age, and sort of certainly carer fatigue as an element of overwhelm has a huge amount of medical and scientific data behind it. You know, years knocked off of people's lives, massive increases in certain health conditions and risks because of the fact that they're coping for two, they don't feel like they can ask for help. And I think with the whole self-awareness, personal growth journey, actually being able to start to teach younger people about this early, and teach them that it's not only okay but good to ask for help. It doesn't show any sign of weakness. It doesn't mean that you're a failure or you can't cope. And these are things that particularly younger folk just aren't taught or told. We have to find it almost by accident, normally through our own crises.
what I always find interesting is it's how eager we are to offer our assistance to other people, and we get something from that. We feel good when we've helped somebody, but then we feel bad about asking somebody for help. It's kind of, it doesn't ring true. There's something wrong there. It's like, how can we feel so good when we're offering the help and be so willing to do that, and then feel ashamed or scared to actually reach out and ask for help. So I think that is kind of a bit of a mindset shift there that we need to make. What I was wondering, listening to you talk, Alec, is how do we know when we're getting into that overwhelm. You know, what are the things that we're aware of in ourselves that we can pick up on? And I'll mention something that I realized the other day, and it's just really a little bit strange, but it's something I realized with myself. Is I was hanging out the washing basically, and I've got all like different colored pegs for the washing, and I was hanging them out, and I'm putting the same color pegs on each thing. So, you know, I've got the 2 orange pegs for the t-shirt and another 2, and then I've got blue pegs for the and it was all nicely ordered and pretty and everything. And I kind of suddenly realized that when I'm calm and everything's going well, I will actually take these little tiny things that become very important to me, and I actually take joy in hanging out the washing and getting it all hung out nicely and neatly, and with, I know it's maybe a little bit OCD or whatever, but yeah, if I'm not okay, then it just gets hung up, however, and I don't even pay any attention to that kind of thing. And it was just a sudden, like, kind of reckoning that I've never noticed that before. You know, when I seem to feel calm and I'm happy, that gets done in a different way to when everything's, I'm a little bit overwhelmed and I'm stressed and I'm rushing. And so I wondered for you guys if there's anything that you've noticed yourselves that brings your awareness to the fact that actually I'm probably a bit overwhelmed.
Very much what you just described. You know, what I think of, and I know it's quite popular in social media, is glimmers, little things during the day that make you feel really quite happy, give you a sense of joy, like pairing up the colors of your pegs. That's when I know everything is smooth, everything's in alignment, I'm working well. When I start to feel like everything is personally against me, like the clothes peg that snaps, and I'm like, you did that on purpose. You knew that I was rushed. It's like, seriously, this is a plastic clothes peg. It's got zero intent towards me. It's the full-on putting my own perceptions on it. And I'm absolutely certain that it did not break on purpose just to slow me down on that day. But what it did do was let me share a look with my dog that said, okay, you're not really being entirely rational about this. And I think that, for me, is the sort of stuff that says a little bit of self-care needed, even if it's just thinking about self-care.
You both raised a really interesting point, and I think this comes from the fact that when we feel really overwhelmed, we're pretty much living in the future. And when we are peaceful and calm, we are more mindful of the day. We're more mindful of the moments of the day, like those little glimmers of fun or enjoyment, like noticing that the sun is out and the temperature is lovely today. If we rushed, if we overwhelmed, we don't even take notice of our environment, because the only thing going on in our heads is the self-talk. After do this, and on Friday's that, and then how do I fit that guy in, and how do I do, and when do I cook, and when do I do this, and my boss wants this deadline, and we are constantly living in the future, thinking ahead, and that distracts us actually of doing what we need to do as well. And what happens if people get so overwhelmed and they just sit down and procrastinate and do nothing, and then things get worse to us, to pile up, and so on and so forth. So I think it's the living in the future and being overwhelmed by deadlines, by dates, and that makes us also almost plucked for prioritizing, because sometimes we start prioritizing stuff which is in 2 weeks' time. It doesn't need to be done today. We could happily park it for 3 days and then do actually what's important. And we kind of lose this, or at least I used to do that. I lose focus. What is really needed now, today? What can wait?
Yeah, Gabby, I think, sorry, Alex.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I think it's far easier for us to be aware of when we're not overwhelmed, that when everything's going okay, like Alex said, with the glimmers and, you know, noticing being in the present and grounded. I think that's far easier to be aware of than when we're in the overwhelm, because once we get in that overwhelmed state, we're not really thinking straight a lot of the time. So it's more difficult to actually be aware of that. So I think for me, I've learned to, you know, I have systems in place to try and catch that. So whether it be kind of mindfulness practices, journaling, or even like, you know, just planning, sitting down at the beginning of the week and like, what do I have this week? You know, what's important, what's not, what am I going to focus on first? So, you know, I've learned that, you know, I need to have certain systems in place to be able to catch that. To catch that before I get too deeply into that overwhelm, so that I can steer myself back and get grounded and back, like you said, Gabby, back in the present. Because once we're in the overwhelm and everything's in turmoil, it can be very, very hard to focus. I wonder if you guys have any systems that you use to keep yourself in check there.
Something that you mentioned and that Gabby brought up about this future pacing, placing ourselves in anxiety, you know, that elevates my threat state. It is a clear reminder to me that whilst I have many, many coping tools for PTSD, when I have that pressure, when I feel that I'm back in the sense of I've got to take these immediate urgent actions or else somebody or something is at risk, I start to get the physical kind of responses that I was suffering very early on when I was diagnosed with complex trauma. And I just revert back to those coping mechanisms that I had there. You know, the stop, pattern, interrupt, stop, take a breath, observe, pull back, gain perspective, practice what works, because they bring us to the now, and that allows us to have that opportunity to try and return ourselves to the soothe state. So there's a really important part there about overwhelm that fits in with the medically enhanced conditions, the reduction in life expectancy, which is that overwhelm and anxiety have really bad impacts on our health systems, not just our mental health, our immunity, everything. So the stop system, notice what's going on, observing what it's doing to me, and then, as the name of our thing says, practicing the wise mind. That's where I get to start to think, okay, who are my resources? Who are the people that I know are my safety net that are going to take work on for me, save me doing this, that, or the other? And all of those things allow me to start to find myself back in the plain sailing, even keel state that I was when I realized that I could take control of my personal growth and development. So it's that important of a wake-up call to me, you know, the life-changing, potentially life-saving alterations that I made 3 or 4 years ago with the PTSD are equally as important and relevant for overwhelm.
Yeah, they're really, really good points. For me, the way I deal with overwhelm now is a little bit similar to you, Melanie. I make a list of priorities and I look at my calendar. I have still an old-fashioned paper one where I can see the entire month and the week very quickly rather than have to type in and find out what's going on. So I look into it, I see what needs to be done, what do I need to prioritize. And what really helps for me is a reflection the night before, because what I used to do is get up in the morning, think, oh, I have so much to do. And then I waste 3-4 hours in the morning because I can't face the day. I would do things, but nothing really focused. And I wouldn't get anything done. I would start 5 things on the list and get nothing done. So what I do in the night before, I said, okay, tomorrow out of my priority list, this needs to be done. And then I say I do this first and this and then this, and I stick with it until it's done before I start the next one. And that's the way I'm doing it now. And I actually get them just finished. And as soon as something's finished, you can put it out of your mind. So that's how I do it these days.
I also remember learning a tip from you, Gabby, which is kind of more of a flow list than a to-do list. There are certain elements of jobs and tasks that won't be completed until that part of a different project is squared away. So I know that helps with the procrastination. By putting that part in line, I know that somewhere down the line, there's 3 or 4 other elements that will fall into place a lot more smoothly and with less stress and overwhelm, because I got that important moving part right at that time. Watchmakers, when they put together these intricate, tiny works of art, they don't start off with the tiniest little cog that needs to be in the center last. You have to prepare that. You have to know what are the important parts and fit them into. And yes, that takes a little bit of planning and practice, but it also allows us to be very mindful, because you need to sort of sit there and stop and work that stuff out from a place of calmness. So I think that kind of flow list that you shared with me was a godsend, and I thank you for it.
Yeah, flow list is really important because a lot of the tasks we have are a longer journey. So sometimes I notice I get overwhelmed thinking I have to get that finished. And because I'm thinking of the whole mountain at the same time, it feels overwhelming. While if I break that mountain down and I said, okay, the first step is to do this, and I can do that on Thursday. And then, for example, I have to wait for an answer back from somebody. I do it, I send it off, and because I have it broken down to a flow list, I can forget about it. I may make a note into a diary to chase up the person if they haven't come back to me, right? But then I can forget about that project for a few days until that's done, and then I can continue. That's why I call it a flow list. It's like I'm breaking everything down, and then I concentrate on the next step, and I don't focus on the full mountain. I focus on the next step up the mountain, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Gabby. I just wanted to mention one thing, as I know we really need to start wrapping up soon, but for me also it's very important to bring my awareness to what is overwhelming me. Because I think sometimes we can think it's one thing, oh, the kids are driving me crazy, I can't cope. But it's actually like, I mean, I know personally at the moment there is one specific task I need to do and I am putting it off because I don't want to do it. And it's there in the back of my head constantly. And I kind of pushing it away. And that's the thing that's going to make me feel overwhelmed if I don't deal with it. It's not going to be all the other stuff going on. It's that one thing that I need to deal with and I don't want to deal with. So I think Gabby's laughing there. She's been there. So I think it's very important to actually assess, what is this overwhelm that I'm starting to feel? Where is it coming from? What do I need to do? Where do I need to be focusing my attention? Would you agree with that, Gabby?
I have one tomorrow. I was putting off since January, and I'm going to do it tomorrow. The tax return. I think this is one part. I haven't met anyone yet who loves to do a tax return, right? And it has to be done every year. And every year I promise myself I do it early. I have it done by summer. And each time I do it about 4 weeks before it's in. And overwhelm settles in because the deadline is coming, right? But I need that pressure to actually make me sit down and actually do it.
And
so hopefully the day after, as I said, the day after tomorrow, Gabby, you're going to be feeling totally calm. And Alex, sorry, what were you going to say?
Not at all, no. Closing thought from me would be that, yes, sometimes we work best to a deadline, and that's fine. No one's saying that that's something that you shouldn't do. But there's also kind of CBTing your overwhelm, like you just suggested. You've got the activating event and you go straight to the consequence. That is overwhelm. So look at the B, which in your case is, I know that there's something that I really don't want to do. So using CBT as a practice to help you sort of treat, in air quotes, treat your overwhelm is quite sensible.
And it's working, because in the old days I would do the tax return 2 days before it's due. At least I'm now a month out, right? This is good. I'm improving.
Excellent. Okay, guys, I think maybe it's time to wrap up this episode. So thank you all for joining us. The contact details of the participants will be in the comments below. So thank you for watching, and look forward to you joining us again in our next podcast. Thank you, guys.